Picture something with me. Not a vault, not an auction room with a man in a good suit holding a hammer. A shoebox, or a biscuit tin with a faded lid on the top shelf of a closet in a house you may have already sold. Inside, pinned to a scrap of felt or tangled together in a heap, are the pins. The pins nobody wears. A gold bar with one small pearl. A silver circle. Something enamelled and green. Something with a stone missing and a bent point. And every one of them belonged to a woman who is not here anymore, and who put it on purpose, for a reason she never wrote down. Let me be honest at the start instead of the end, because I would rather you trust me than be excited. Most of what is in that tin is worth $10, $20, $40, and no storytelling changes that. But a few of them are not. And the reason nobody in your family caught it is almost never that the valuable one was hidden. It was right there on top. It just did not look like anything. 25 brooches tonight, and I am going to skip the parade of famous names, because famous names are the one thing in this business already priced correctly. Nobody walks past a signed Cartier. The money still sitting loose is sitting somewhere else. So learn to notice 3 things. What the piece is actually made of, who made it, and in which country. And the strange one, what is missing from it? That third question is the one nobody asks. A brooch almost never loses value by breaking. It loses it by becoming incomplete. A fitting that came off. A paper thrown away. A little spring somebody flattened. Half of a pear that went to a different daughter. Find the missing thing, because the absence is where the money quietly walked out of the room. And here is why you have never heard most of this. None of it can be sold to you. A fact about a hallmark cannot be patented. A way of holding a pin up to a lamp cannot be repackaged every spring. There is no catalogue page for it, so the machinery of this trade has no financial reason to teach it. Not malice, just the shape of the business. And number 1 is a brooch that crossed the block 3 times in 28 years. Everybody quotes the first 2 numbers. Almost nobody quotes the third. Number 25. The lodge pin and the sorority badge. The Order of the Eastern Star with its 5 coloured points. A Masonic square and compasses. A class pin with a year on it. A sorority badge shaped like an arrow or a key. Almost every American family has one, and almost every family reads it as costume. It never was. A lodge or a college chapter ordered these as regalia, and regalia had to last. Firms like L.G. Balfour of Attleboro, Massachusetts, and Burr, Patterson and Company of Detroit made them in 10 and 14 karat gold, with genuine seed pearls and small rubies on the better ones. Look for a carat mark, a maker's name, and very often a member's name and chapter number engraved on the back. Plain ones move in the tens of dollars. Solid gold badges with real stones have been known to reach the low hundreds. And the missing thing is the little guard chain and guard pin that hung beside it, because they were sold as a set, and split apart both halves lose. Number 24. The pin with a foreign word on the back. I am putting this early on purpose, because saving you from disappointment is worth as much as saving you from a bad sale. Turn a pin over and you may find a word that is not a name. Siam. Israel. Peru. Occupied Japan. Western Germany. Those are country marks, and each one is a date stamp in disguise. Occupied Japan is the sharpest. Goods marked that way come from the American occupation years, roughly 1945 to 1952. 7 years, then the mark vanishes forever, so a pin stamped that way cannot be older and cannot be younger. Now the honest part. Siam sterling, that black niello work with the dancing figures half the servicemen in America brought home, is real silver and genuinely lovely, and it is also extremely common, mostly trading in the tens of dollars. A story is not the same as scarcity, and scarcity is not the same as demand. All 3 have to line up before a price moves. Number 23. Cut steel and Wedgwood. Pick up a brooch that looks set with hundreds of tiny dark grey diamonds, sparkling in a sooty, moonlit way. Not white fire. Something cooler. That is cut steel, and it is a forgotten luxury. Individual steel studs, each faceted by hand, each riveted through a backplate. Some of the finest came from Birmingham, England, where Matthew Boulton was producing cut steel in the late 1700s. The check needs only a lamp. Turn it over. On genuine cut steel, you can see the rivets, the little tails of each stud coming through the back. Marcasite, the thing people confuse it with, is set from the front and shows no rivets. And cut steel rusts, so a faint orange bloom in the crevices is a good sign, not a bad one. Pair that with Wedgwood jasperware plaques, those pale blue ovals with a small white classical figure mounted in cut steel frames. Good ones have been known to bring the low hundreds. Families read them as chipped old china because no modern jeweler has any reason to explain a riveted steel stud to you. Number 22. Mizpah and the brooches with words on them. There is a Victorian brooch that carries a single word across the front in raised letters. Mother, friendship, and most movingly, Mizpah. It comes from the book of Genesis, and it means, roughly, "May the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent one from another." It was worn by people being separated, emigrants leaving Ireland and Germany for America, soldiers, sons going west. Very often it was made as a pair and split between the two of them, so each carried half. So this is a completeness item above all. Look for the matching half somewhere in the family, and check the back for an inscription with 2 names and a date, because that inscription is the value. Gold-filled ones move modestly. Solid gold with a dated inscription and a documented family story has been known to reach the low hundreds and beyond. And notice the problem for a dealer. You cannot restock a dead woman's name, so it gets weighed as scrap and the letter is thrown out first. Number 21. Marcasite, and a German name worth knowing. Nearly every jewelry box in America has a marcasite piece. Silver, dark, spangled with tiny grey stones, and everyone assumes department store filler. Most of it is, but some carry 2 initials, TF. Theodor Fahrner ran a firm in Pforzheim, Germany, and did something radical. He hired serious artists and architects, Joseph Maria Olbrich, Patrice Huber, Franz Bohrers, to design jewelry made partly by machine and sold at a middle price. He registered the TF trademark in 1901 after a silver medal at the Paris World's Fair, and his work sold in London through Murrell, Bennett and Company and was carried by Liberty. Look for TF, sometimes in a small circle, with a silver standard, 935 early and 925 later, and after the early 30s the words Original Fahrner. Then check the marcasites. On good work, each sits in its own metal cup. Glued flat marcasite is a modern copy. Signed pieces have been reported well into the hundreds. And the archive that would prove who designed what burned when the Pforzheim factory was bombed in 1945. Collectors rebuilt the attributions themselves, unpaid, over decades. Number 20. Egyptian Revival. In November of 1922, Howard Carter opened a sealed doorway in the Valley of the Kings, and within a year the Western world had lost its mind about Egypt. Scarabs, lotus flowers, winged sun discs, sphinxes with turquoise blue wings. The costume houses and the Czech glassmakers poured out Egyptian brooches for years, and the good ones are beautiful, moulded glass in that chalky turquoise and coral red, set in stamped gilded frames with wonderfully crisp detail. The Czech has 2 parts. On a period piece, the turquoise and the red are the glass itself, coloured all the way through. On a reproduction, they are usually paint or enamel sitting on metal, and paint chips in a way glass never does. Then look for a country stamp, because the word Czechoslovakia points to a real window, from 1918 into the early 1990s. Good examples have been known to trade from the tens into the low hundreds, the finest Czech glass panels higher. Number 19. The fur clip, and the thing on the back that is not a pin. Pure mechanics, and once you see it, you will see it forever. Turn a piece over. Instead of a long pin stem, you find a flat plate with 2 sharpened prongs, hinged, that snap down like a strong clothespin. That is a fur clip. It was built to grip through a fur collar or a thick lapel in a way a pin never could. Everywhere from the 30s into the 50s, then gone, because coats changed. Here is what matters. Many were made as pairs, 2 matching clips that also slotted into a shared frame so they could be worn together as one large brooch. 2 clips plus a frame, 3 pieces. So ask the question, where is the frame? Where is the other clip? An orphaned single clip is worth a fraction of a complete set, and I have seen families divide matched pairs between 2 sisters in perfect fairness and perfect ignorance, and halve the value in an afternoon. The frame is the missing thing almost every time. It is a plain, ugly strip of metal, it looks like a spare part, and it is often the most expensive strip of metal in the house. Number 18. Celtic Revival, and the most profitable rename in jewellery history. In August of 1850, something was found near the shore at Bettystown in County Meath, Ireland. A brooch, early medieval, made around the late 700s. Silver and gold and glass and amber, with something like 50 separate cast panels of filigree, so finely worked that a Victorian critic said it looked more like the work of fairies than of human beings. It ended up with a Dublin jeweller named George Waterhouse, and Waterhouse did the cleverest thing anyone in this trade has ever done. He named it. He called it the Tara brooch, tying it to the Hill of Tara, seat of the High Kings of Ireland, with which it has no connection whatsoever. The National Museum of Ireland states plainly today that the Tara attribution was applied by a dealer in order to increase its value. It worked. Queen Victoria had it sent to Windsor Castle to inspect. It showed at the Great Exhibition in London in 1851, then Paris, then Dublin in 1853, and the Queen ordered copies. Waterhouse sold those copies for over 20 years off a name he invented. So if you have an Irish or Scottish annular brooch, look for Dublin assay marks, because a Dublin hallmark lifts a piece clear out of the souvenir category into the low hundreds and upward. Number 17. The little creatures. Bees, beetles, dragonflies, a lizard curling around a branch, a spider on a web. The Victorians adored jewelled insects, and modern families find them faintly unsettling and put them at the bottom of the box. What you are looking at, in the good ones, is a serious jewel wearing a joke. The check is proportion, not sparkle. Under a lamp, look at the underside. On a fine period insect, the legs and antennae are individually made and soldered on, thin, springy, slightly irregular. On a modern copy, the whole creature is cast in one piece, and the legs are chunky and identical, because casting cannot produce a hair-fine leg. Gem-set gold insects have been reported from the hundreds into the thousands. And one correction, because it circulates constantly. Green-eyed insects are not automatically set with rare green garnets. Green glass, green paste, peridot and demantoid all look alike to the naked eye, and the gap between them is the gap between $40 and $4,000. Anyone who tells you which from across a room is guessing at your expense. Number 16. The brooches that spell things. The loveliest secret in Victorian jewellery, and it takes 10 seconds to read once somebody shows you how. Look at a brooch set with a row of small, mixed-coloured stones. It looks random, muddy, even. Now read the first letter of each stone in order, left to right. Ruby, emerald, garnet, amethyst, ruby, diamond, regard, or diamond, emerald, amethyst, ruby, emerald, sapphire, topaz, dearest. There are brooches out there that spell a woman's name, or a door, using lapis for the L and opal for the O. Somebody chose those stones, in that order, for one specific person. Then that person died, and the message sat unread in a drawer for 130 years, waiting for you. Acrostic brooches that read cleanly have been known to trade from the low hundreds upward, and they are missed constantly because a valuer working at speed sees small, cheap stones and prices the stones. You cannot mass-produce a coded love token, so the trade has quietly declined to build a market around it. Number 15. Coral, and a word about the law. Carved coral was everywhere in Victorian and mid-century jewellery. Salmon pink roses, carved faces, branch coral clustered like a bouquet, deep oxblood beads. Older American women very often own a piece, and it is very often better than it looks. The check is a lamp and patience. Genuine coral shows fine parallel growth striations, faint lines running along the surface like grain in wood. Dyed bone shows a dot and pit pattern instead. Plastic shows a mold seam and feels warm and weightless. That deep oxblood tone is what collectors chase hardest, and fine antique carved coral has been reported reaching the hundreds and beyond in gold mounts. Now the serious part, and I will not soften it. Coral, ivory, tortoiseshell, and certain other natural materials are subject to federal and state restrictions in the United States. Several states are stricter than the federal rules, and those rules have changed more than once recently. Owning an inherited piece and selling one are entirely different legal situations. Check the current federal and state regulations where you actually live, and talk to a qualified appraiser. Please do not take a video's word for it, including mine. Number 14. Norwegian and Danish enamel. A particular pin turns up in American boxes, especially in families with Scandinavian roots or a relative who served in Europe. Silver, gilded, shaped like a spoon or a leaf, with enamel in an astonishing colour. A clear, glowing turquoise, a deep marine blue, white like fresh snow. That is Norwegian enamel work. The names to know are David Andersen of Oslo and Marius Hammer of Bergen, along with the traditional folk brooches called solje, silver discs hung with dozens of little spoon-shaped dangles that shiver and catch light when the wearer moves. Look for the word Norway or sterling Norway with a maker's mark. Look at the enamel under a lamp for a deep, glassy depth rather than a flat painted look. And inspect every millimetre of the edges for chips, because with enamel, condition is not a factor, it is the whole ballgame. Signed pieces in good condition trade from the tens into the low hundreds, larger designs higher. The reason they slip through is language. An American appraiser reads Norway as a souvenir stamp rather than a maker's country, and moves on. Number 13. Georg Jensen, and a correction he insists on making. Georg Jensen of Copenhagen is a genuine giant. Heavy, hand-finished sterling, designs that look like nature simplified to its bones, and every piece carries a design number stamped on the back. Not a style name, a number, which means a Jensen brooch can be looked up and identified precisely. Look for the Jensen mark inside a dotted oval, the word Denmark, a silver standard, 830 on older pieces or 925 later, and that design number. Genuine Jensen brooches have been reported from the low hundreds into the thousands. Now the correction. There is a small Jensen enamel pin, a Danish flag with a crown, the monogram CX, and the dates 1870 to 1940. Arno Malinowski designed it for the 70th birthday of King Christian, the 10th, in September of 1940, 5 months into the German occupation. Danes wore it as a quiet act of resistance. It is called the King Mark, and it is one of the most moving objects in 20th century jewellery. And it is not rare. Records indicate more than 1 million were sold between 1940 and 1947. Silver examples trade for a few tens of dollars. I tell you that because I would rather hand you a true story than an inflated price. A magnificent history and a modest value can live in the same object. Rarity, not meaning, is what the market pays for. Let me pause for 2 things before the top 12, and then I will not interrupt you again. If this is useful, subscribing genuinely helps, because this research takes a week and gets watched by people who actually own the objects. I have also made a free companion guide, the Brooch Value Field Guide, with the country mark date chart, the completeness checklist, the acrostic stone alphabet, and the maker's marks table. It costs nothing, there is no book at the end of it, and the link is in the description. I do not run ads on these, and I am not going to sell you a price guide. Second, the part I never skip. I am not a certified appraiser, and nothing here is a professional appraisal, an insurance valuation, or legal advice. Every figure is a general range drawn from reported market results, and condition, repairs, treatment, and provenance can change any of them by an order of magnitude in either direction. Before you buy, sell, insure, or restore anything you believe is valuable, have it examined by a certified appraiser and check your own state and local regulations. Number 12. Zuni needlepoint and Hopi overlay. Set aside what you think you know about Southwestern jewellery, because there are distinct traditions inside it. Zuni, needlepoint, and petit point uses dozens, sometimes hundreds, of tiny stones, each individually cut and each set in its own handmade silver bezel with fine silver drops between them. Under a lamp, it looks like embroidery done in stone. Hopi overlay is entirely different. 2 sheets of silver, the top cut away in a design and soldered over the bottom, the lower layer oxidized, dark and textured. Usually no stones at all. The check that separates handwork from import is this. On genuine work, each bezel is slightly different, because each was formed by hand around an irregular stone. On a machine copy, the stones are identical and frequently glued into a stamped tray. And look for a hallmark, because many native artists sign with initials or a small personal symbol. One legal point. The Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1990 makes it unlawful to offer or display for sale any art or craft product in a way that falsely suggests it is Indian-produced. Real federal law, real consequences. So if you are selling, describe accurately and never guess at a tribal attribution. Signed work by known Zuni and Hopi silversmiths has been reported from the low hundreds into the thousands. Number 11. Newark, New Jersey. A great American story almost nobody in America knows. Around 1900, Newark was one of the jewelry capitals of the world, and two firms there made things that stop you in your tracks: Unger Brothers and William B. Kerr and Company. Picture a small sterling brooch, all metal, no stones, showing a woman's face in high relief with her hair flowing out into poppies or water lilies. That is American Art Nouveau, die-stamped and hand-finished, and it sits today in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum, the Newark Museum, and the RISD Museum. Your check is specific. Unger Brothers marked their work with the letters U and B interlocked inside a circle, usually with sterling and 925. Kerr used a farces, a bundle of rods with an axe, in the early years, and later a hammer with 3 X marks. Kerr was absorbed into Gorham by 1927, and Unger stopped around 1910, so both marks are closed windows in time. Signed pieces have been known to trade from the low hundreds upward, and here is why they are missed. Silver, not gold, with no stones. A buyer working by weight looks at 2 inches of silver and offers you silver money. The artistry, which is the entire value, weighs nothing. Number 10. Gold-in-quartz. My favourite purely American thing on the list. Gold was found at Sutter's Mill in 1848, and the easy gold in the stream beds went fast. What followed was hard rock mining, blasting gold out of white quartz veins underground. And San Francisco jewelers did something inspired with the offcuts. They sliced the gold-bearing quartz into thin, polished slabs. White rock shot through with rivers of native gold, and set those slabs into heavy gold brooches and lockets. So a gold-in-quartz brooch is not a stone in a setting. It is a piece of the actual mine, made wearable. A slice of California from 1865. Under a lamp, real gold-in-quartz shows the gold as irregular natural veins and flecks running through milky white and grey rock, never as an even sprinkle, and the mount is usually a warm, rosy 10 or 18-carat gold with hand engraving. Painted imitations show gold sitting on the surface. Antiques Roadshow appraised one gold-in-quartz ring from the 1870s or 1880s at around $1,900, and good brooches have been reported in similar territory. Nobody markets these because you cannot manufacture them. The material is finite and geological. No brand, no house, no season. Number 9. The Little Painted Face. A small oval brooch with a portrait in it. A young woman in a high-waisted dress. A man in a stiff collar. A child. And every family in America has decided, without looking, that it is a printed picture of an ancestor nobody can name anymore. A portrait miniature is not a print. It is a painting, made with a brush of a few hairs on ivory or vellum or porcelain, by a trained artist who was commissioned and paid, at a time when this was the only way on earth to carry a person's face with you. Your check needs magnification, and the camera on your telephone will do it. Real brushstrokes look like brushstrokes. Individual hairs. Layered translucent washes in the skin. A print shows a regular dot or line pattern the instant you magnify it, dead even across the whole surface, which no human hand produces. Then look at the back of the frame, because miniatures often have a lock of hair, a name, or a date sealed behind glass. Genuine hand-painted miniatures have been known to trade from the hundreds into the thousands, signed works far higher, and they are valued as paintings entirely separately from the gold around them. Number 8. White gold, platinum, and the difference that costs thousands. Picture a delicate white brooch from the 1920s. Lacy, pierced all over like frost on a window, set with small white stones. There are hundreds of thousands of these in American families, and they look interchangeable. They are not. Some are platinum, some are white gold. And the gap between two identical-looking pieces can be enormous. Here is how to read it without a test kit. Platinum is normally stamped plat, or platinum, or the numbers 900 or 950. White gold reads 14K or 18K, and American pieces sometimes carry the name Bellet, an early white gold formula. Platinum is noticeably heavy for its size and holds fine pierced detail crisply because it is a stronger metal, so the finest lacework tends to be platinum. White gold is lighter and often shows a faint, warm yellow tone in worn spots where plating has thinned. And here is the missing thing again. These are fragile. Look for a snapped section repaired with a blob of solder and gaps where small stones have fallen out. One missing stone is cheap. 15 missing stones and 3 amateur repairs put a piece in a different bracket entirely. Good period platinum filigree has been reported from the hundreds into the thousands. Number 7. Pearls, and the year that changed everything. I will keep this tight because it comes down to one fact and one test. Before commercial cultured pearls became widely available, roughly from the 1920s onward, essentially every pearl in Western jewellery was natural, formed by chance in a wild oyster. Natural pearls of good size and quality are rare in a way that is hard to overstate, and they can be worth many multiples of cultured pearls that look identical. Now the honest limit. You cannot tell them apart by eye. Nobody can. Not a dealer, not a jeweler, not me. The reliable method is X-ray imaging at a gemological laboratory, which shows the internal growth structure, and it is a paid service. So the practical question is not whether they are natural. It is whether the piece is old enough and good enough to be worth finding out. And the answer is usually yes, if the mount is fine period work in gold or platinum, if the pearls are graduated and slightly irregular rather than perfectly matched, and if the drill holes are very small. That laboratory report is the missing thing. And notice who benefits from your not commissioning it. Someone offering a flat price for an old pearl brooch is buying the right to find out for himself. Number 6. Old cut diamonds, and a warning about cleaning. Before electric light, diamonds were cut by hand to be seen by candle. Old mine and old European cuts have a deep, soft, slow flash, quite unlike modern glitter. Under a lamp, look sideways into the stone for large irregular facets, a high crown, and very often a small flat circle at the bottom point, called an open culet, which looks like a tiny window. That culet is the fingerprint of hand cutting. Decades of face powder, hand cream and soap build up under old settings and turn brilliant stones grey and dead. Many families concluded grandmother's brooch was paste for exactly that reason. They were looking at dirt. And here is where I part company with the usual advice, because the usual advice is dangerous. Yes, warm water with a drop of dish soap and a very soft brush will wake up an ordinary open-backed setting, but do not do it blind. Turn the brooch over first. If the stones sit in closed backs with no opening underneath, stop. Georgian and early Victorian jewellers backed stones with thin metal foil to boost their colour, and water gets behind that foil, tarnishes it, and ruins the appearance permanently. There is no undoing it. The same warning applies to anything containing pearls, coral, opal, turquoise or enamel. Period diamond brooches, even in worn mounts, have been reported from the hundreds into many thousands, and a jeweller with a loupe should confirm what those stones are before anyone offers you a token price. Number 5. Art Deco and the fruit salad. The 1920s and 30s produced some of the most desirable jewellery ever made, and it is recognisable once you know the vocabulary. Straight lines, sharp geometry, platinum, black onyx against white diamond, calibre cut stones, meaning stones cut to fit a shape exactly, fitted together like tiles with almost no metal showing. And then the wonderful one. In those decades, Cartier began making pieces set with carved emeralds, rubies and sapphires shaped like leaves and berries, in bright clashing colour, inspired by Indian gem-setting traditions. They were called Tutti Frutti. The trade sometimes still calls them fruit salad brooches, which I love. For scale, a Cartier Tutti Frutti clip brooch from the 1930s was reported selling at Christie's in Geneva above $1.3 million. The costume houses copied that look enthusiastically at the time, and those copies are collectible in their own right, so this is not a dismissal. Your check is the cutting. Real calibre cut stones sit flush in individual metal seats. Moulded glass fruit salad is a single-shaped piece with the leaf veins moulded in, sitting in a stamped cup. Under a lamp, the difference is obvious. From across a room, it is invisible, which is exactly the distance most people make their decisions from. Number 4. The brooch that used to be something else. This is the item I most want you to remember, because it applies to half the box. Great 19th and early 20th century jewels were built to transform. A tiara that came apart into 3 brooches. A necklace whose centerpiece unclipped as a pendant. A brooch with a small screw fitting that let it mount onto a hair comb or a bracelet. Expensive things were designed to earn their keep more than one way, which means the complete object was never just the object. It was the object plus a small bag of fittings, screw-in pendant loops, a separate tiara frame, a fitted leather case with shaped recesses. And those fittings are gone. Almost always. They lived in the bottom of the case, they looked like hardware, and somewhere around 1960, somebody clearing a drawer decided they were junk. So turn every substantial old brooch over and look for threaded holes, small hooks, slots, or a fitting that does not seem to do anything. If you find one, that piece had parts. Then go through every envelope and button tin in the house, because a complete convertible jewel with its original fittings and case has been known to sell for a large multiple of the same jewel sold bare. The fittings are the least photogenic part of the object. No catalogue ever put them on the cover, so they were the first thing lost, everywhere, by everyone. Number 3. When the name outweighs the gold. Now the territory where a signature is worth more than everything it is stamped into. Cartier, Van Cleef & Arpels, Tiffany, Boucheron. A brooch by one of these houses can be worth many multiples of an identical unsigned piece in the same metal with the same stones. And these signatures are tiny, often smaller than a grain of rice, tucked along the edge of the pin stem, on the underside of a clasp plate, or hidden in a fold of the design and worn thin by a century of handling. There is very often a serial number too, and a house archive that can confirm it. So a loop over the entire back, slowly, is worth more per minute than anything else you can do tonight. One real example, so you can feel the ceiling. In 1960, Prince Sadruddin Aga Khan commissioned Cartier to set a 37-carat square emerald into a brooch with marquise-cut diamonds for the model Nina Dyer. When it came to auction at Christie's in Geneva in November of 2024, it was reported selling for nearly $9 million, making it the most valuable emerald ever sold at auction. One stone, one signature, one documented history. Number 2. A flamingo and the sale that moved a market. In 1940, the Duke of Windsor commissioned Cartier in Paris to make a brooch for his wife, Wallis Simpson, the American divorcee from Baltimore for whom Edward VIII had given up the throne of England 4 years earlier. The result was a flamingo, standing on one leg, tail plumes set with calibre-cut rubies, sapphires and emeralds, body and legs paved with diamonds, its beak a warm yellow citrine. And Cartier's own archives record something remarkable about how it was built. The stones came out of jewellery the Duchess already owned. A necklace and 4 bracelets were unmounted to make the bird. Because it was 1940, trade routes were closed, and even the Windsors could not simply order new stones. Now the part that matters to you. When the Duchess died, her jewellery was sold by Sotheby's in Geneva on the 2nd and 3rd of April, 1987, the proceeds going to the Institut Pasteur in Paris. The pre-sale estimate was around $7.5 million, thought ambitious at the time. The sale reportedly realised over $50 million. 87 of the lots were by Cartier, roughly 7 times the estimate. And the experts who set that estimate were not fools. They were the best in the world, with full information, and they were wrong by a factor of 7 because they were valuing objects and the room was buying a story. Prices for comparable mid-century Cartier animal jewels rose substantially in the years that followed. Number 1. 3 sales, and the number nobody quotes. A Belle Époque Devant de Corsage by Cartier, made around 1912. A Devant de Corsage is the grandest brooch form ever made, a large ornament worn across the front of the bodice, and this one centres on a pear-shaped diamond of about 34 carats, with an oval of about 23.5 and a marquise of about 6.5, mounted in platinum. In 1991, it came up at Christie's in Geneva and was reported selling for $2.65 million. 23 years later, in May of 2014, it returned to Christie's Geneva as Lot 259 and was reported selling for $17.5 million. And that is where every version of this story stops. Let me finish it. In 2019, that same brooch came to auction again, at Christie's in New York, carrying an estimate of $10 to $15 million. It was reported selling for $10,603,500, from $17.5 million to $10.6 million in 5 years. The same brooch, the same stones. Nothing changed except the room it was standing in. And let me correct a number that circulates constantly about this piece. You will see the 2014 result described as a 660% increase over the 1991 price. 17.5 divided by 2.65 is about 6.6, and 6.6 times the old price is a 560% increase, not 660. A small slip, started in one write-up, copied by everyone since. If a number that public can sit wrong for a decade with nobody checking, be very careful with the numbers a stranger quotes you across a counter. So here is the real lesson, and it is not the one you were expecting. The reason to learn what is in your jewelry box is not that it is all going up. It is not. These markets move in both directions. They are thin. They depend on who happens to be in the room on a Tuesday, and even the greatest objects on Earth can lose 40% in 5 years. Anyone promising you a one-way ride is selling you something. The reason to learn is that knowledge protects you. At the moment when somebody who does know more than you looks at your family's things and makes an offer, that moment comes to nearly everybody, usually at the worst possible time, usually within a month of a funeral. And on that day, the only thing between your family and a bad decision is whether anyone in the room can read the back of a brooch. So, 3 questions, and they are all you need. What is it made of? Tested rather than assumed. Who made it and in which country? Read off the marks rather than guessed from the look. And what is missing? The fitting, the pair, the frame, the tag, the case, the paper. Find the missing thing before somebody else notices it is gone. And once more, plainly, I am not a certified appraiser. Nothing here is an appraisal, an insurance valuation, or legal advice. Have anything you believe is valuable examined by a certified appraiser, and check the regulations in your own state and locality before you buy, sell, insure, or ship it, particularly if it contains coral, ivory, or tortoiseshell. Now, I would love to hear from you, and I do read these. Tell me which one you are going to go look for. The fur clip with the missing frame? The little painted face you always assumed was a print? The badge with somebody's name engraved on the back? And if there is a pin in your family with a story attached, whose it was, where she wore it, what she was doing the day she got it, please tell me. Those are the comments I look forward to all week. And let me say something a good number of you will disagree with. I believe the most destructive force in American antique jewelry is not neglect, and it is not dealers, it is polishing. I think more value has been rubbed off old brooches by well-meaning people with a cloth and a tin of silver polish than has ever been lost to a lowball offer. That dark tone in the recesses of a figural piece is not dirt. It is patina the maker put there deliberately to give the design depth. It takes 4 minutes to scrub away and it does not come back. Plenty of people, including plenty of professionals, think that is nonsense and that a clean piece sells better. Tell me I am wrong. I genuinely want to read the argument. Thank you for sitting with me through all 25. Go find the box, take your time with it, and whatever you decide, do not let anyone hurry you into giving anything away before somebody with no reason to lie to you has read the back of it. I will see you next time.